My name is Linda Carty, and I'm here in the state of Texas on death row.
Does Linda Carty deserve to die?
I wouldn't have any problem with it.
Guilty of capital murder.
But what she did was horrible.
You know, Linda, I don't really think you care about that woman at all.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
You got a little baby that no longer has a mama.
And I don't have anything to do with it.
How
I
can
can't
you say
sit down
you
here.
didn't have anything to do with it when it ends up in your trunk?
Because I was stupid enough to lend somebody my car. That's what I'm guilty of, and I've been telling you that. I can have a baby if I want to have a baby. It takes a little bit of time, big deal.
I think you wanted a baby pretty bad.
Oh, no. You trying to tell me that you think I paid them to do this?
Case 1. Linda Anita Carty, May 16, 2001, Houston, Texas. It was just after midnight when the phone calls started. 11 of them packed into 2 hours. By 1:14 in the morning, 7 calls had been made in just 5 minutes. Something was being coordinated. Linda Carty was 42 years old, a dual British-American citizen, a former drug informant who had once worked with law enforcement. She lived in a Houston apartment complex. Her neighbor, 20-year-old Joanna Rodriguez, had just given birth to a baby boy 3 days earlier. Linda wanted that baby. She had told her common-law husband she was pregnant. She had told her neighbors the baby was coming any day. She told a storage facility employee she had already delivered. No one who saw her during this time thought she looked pregnant at all. In the early hours of May 16th, 4 men burst into Joanna's apartment. Her husband was pistol-whipped and bound with duct tape. Another resident was beaten and restrained, and Joanna, still recovering from childbirth, was taken, along with her newborn son. When police arrived after receiving a tip, they located 2 vehicles connected to Linda Carty. In one car, they found the 3-day-old baby boy, alive. In the trunk of the other, they found Joanna Rodriguez. She had been hogtied. A plastic bag was secured over her head. Her mouth and nose were covered in duct tape. She had suffocated. Linda's fingerprints were inside both vehicles. She was convicted of capital murder in February 2002 and sentenced to death. Her appeals reached the U.S. Supreme Court. They refused to hear the case. As of 2026, Linda Anita Carty has spent over 24 years on death row at the Mountain View unit in Texas, still maintaining her innocence, still waiting. And yet, even death row has its surprises. Case 2. Brittany Marlowe Holberg, November 13, 1996, Amarillo, Texas. An 80-year-old man named A.B. Towery Sr. had just walked home from the grocery store. He let a young woman into his apartment. He would never walk out again. Brittany Holberg was 23 years old. She was addicted to cocaine. She needed money. And that afternoon, inside Towery's small apartment in southwest Amarillo, something shifted. An argument broke out. Then Brittany picked up a hammer. What followed was one of the most violent crime scenes investigators in Randall County had ever documented. Towery was assaulted more than 60 times. A claw hammer, a skillet, an iron, a telephone. Multiple knives, one found bent from the sheer force of the blows. And then, while the 80-year-old was still alive and conscious, a foot-long lamp pole was forced down his throat. He was 80 years old. He had simply opened his front door. After it was over, Brittany calmly showered. She changed into Towery's clothing. She stole his cash. Then she walked outside, hitched a ride with a young couple, and sat in their backseat openly counting the money, paying them with 2 bills that later tested positive for Towery's blood. She drove to a crack house. She spent the night getting high. Brittany fled Texas entirely, making her way to Memphis, Tennessee, where she spent 3 months living in the city's underground. She might have disappeared forever, until the television show America's Most Wanted aired her profile. Viewers recognized her immediately. She was arrested in Memphis without a fight. At trial, Brittany presented 8 different versions of events. The jury wasn't interested in any of them. In March 1998, Judge Patrick Pirtle sentenced her to death. As of 2026, Brittany Marlowe Holberg has spent over 27 years on death row in Texas. She remains one of only 10 women in the state currently facing execution. The next woman didn't need hired men. She worked alone, and she worked methodically. Case 3. Kanae Kijima, 2009, Japan. He was 41 years old. His name was Yoshiyuki Oida. And on the night before his body was found in the back seat of a locked rental car, he had written something on his personal blog. He was finally getting married. He was going to meet his partner's family the next day. He had never been happier. The car was locked from the outside. His keys were missing. Inside, investigators found a charcoal burner, the kind commonly used in Japanese suicides. Except this wasn't a suicide. The woman he planned to marry was named Kanae Kijima. She was 34 years old, elegantly dressed, drove a red Mercedes, and had a profile on Japan's popular marriage hunting websites called Konkatsu. She told men she was a master chef, a devoted future wife. She crafted her entire personality around what lonely, vulnerable men wanted to hear. What she actually was a serial poisoner. Toxicology found sleeping pills in Oid's system. The same pills were found in 2 other men who died under suspicious circumstances after crossing paths with Kijima. One was found dead in his home. Another face down in a stream. A third died in a house fire. But his autopsy revealed the same sedatives in his blood, and surveillance footage showed Kijima withdrawing money from his bank account on the day of the fire. When police raided her Tokyo apartment, they found a mortar and pestle. Forensic analysis matched it directly to the pills found in Oida's body. She had been grinding them down and mixing them into food. She had received nearly 100 million yen from vulnerable men across years. In April 2012, a Japanese court sentenced Kanae Kijima to death. The trial lasted a record-breaking 100 days. She showed no remorse. As of 2026, Kijima remains on death row in Japan, still appealing, still waiting. 3 women on death row. 3 completely different methods. But the next case involves someone who operated on an entirely different scale. If you're finding value in these stories right now, take 1 second and hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Seriously, those 2 small actions are the single biggest way you can say thank you for the hours that go into researching every one of these cases. Every click tells us to keep going, keep digging, keep telling these stories. And trust me, the cases coming up next are ones you will not forget. Case 4. Sante Kimes, July 5, 1998. Manhattan, New York. When staff at 20 East 65th Street reported their employer missing, they told police something strange. Her purse was still there. Her passport was still there. Her dogs hadn't been fed. Irene Silverman, 82 years old, former Rockette, Manhattan socialite, had simply vanished from her own $7 million limestone mansion. The same morning she disappeared, police stopped a woman and her son nearby on an unrelated fraud warrant. Their names were Sante and Kenneth Kimes. In the bag they were carrying, a forged deed transferring Irene Silverman's mansion to a shell company. Wiretap recordings of Silverman's private phone calls, a stun gun box, syringes, a pink sedative, zip ties, $30,000 in cash, and Sante's personal notebooks with step-by-step instructions for how to steal Silverman's identity, forge her property documents, and eliminate her. Irene Silverman's body was never found. The jury convicted them anyway. What made Sante Kimes uniquely terrifying was that this wasn't new behavior. She had previously been convicted of keeping illegal immigrants as slave laborers, confiscating their passports and threatening deportation. She had committed insurance fraud by burning down houses she owned. And in 1998 alone, she and her son Kenny had already murdered 2 other men. A banker in the Bahamas drowned in a bathtub. A business associate shot in the back of the head and dumped near LAX. Kenny eventually confessed to everything. He testified against his own mother. In June 2000, Sante Kimes was sentenced to 120 years and 8 months in prison. Her son received 125 years. California later added life without parole for the Kasdan murder. Sante Kimes died in her prison cell on May 19, 2014. She was 79 years old. She had served 14 years and never admitted to a single crime. The next woman on this list also relied on others to do her dirty work, but her motive was far more personal. We're halfway through 18 cases right now, and I want to know something. Drop your location in the comments, your city, your country, wherever you're watching from. True crime reaches every corner of the world, and I genuinely want to see where this community is coming from. Are you watching this alone at midnight? Are you in the UK, Texas, Japan? Tell me. Let's see just how far capital true crime travels. Case 5. Winnie Ruth Judd. October 16, 1931. Phoenix, Arizona. 2 women were dead inside a rented bungalow on North 2nd Street. Agnes Leroy, 32, an X-ray technician. Hedvig Samuelson, 24, her roommate and closest friend. Both had been shot, and both had been packed, along with their personal belongings, into shipping trunks. The woman responsible was their friend, Winnie Ruth Judd, 26, a medical secretary at the same clinic where Agnes worked. 2 days after the murders, Winnie boarded a passenger train in Phoenix, checked her trunks as luggage, and rode all the way to Los Angeles. She arrived at 7:45 in the morning. Her brother picked her up, unaware of what she was carrying. At the Los Angeles train station, a baggage agent noticed something wrong with one of the trunks. There was a smell, and fluid leaking from the seams. He called the police. Winnie surrendered at a funeral home 4 days later, a bandage wrapped around a gunshot wound on her left hand. Here's where the case takes a turn. Samuelson's body hadn't simply been placed in a trunk. It had been dismembered. Her head, torso, and limbs were distributed between the trunk, a hatbox, and a valise. Investigative journalists later noted the dismemberment appeared surgically precise, leading many to suspect that someone with medical training had been involved. That someone was rumored to be John Happy Jack Halloran, a married businessman whose gray Packard was spotted at the bungalow both the night of the murders and the following day. He was indicted, then released. The judge called the state's case an idle gesture. Winnie was convicted of first-degree murder in 1932. She escaped the Arizona asylum 6 times over 30 years. She was paroled in 1971, received a full discharge in 1983, and died in 1998 at the age of 93. The next case involves a woman who never made headlines until it was far too late. Case 6. Kailai. November 14, 2011. Chongqing, China. Neil Haywood was a 41-year-old British businessman who had spent years building connections inside China's political elite. He was well-dressed, well-connected, and trusted. He had no reason to believe the invitation to Chongqing would be his last. The woman who invited him was Kailai, wife of Bo Xilai, one of the most powerful politicians in China. She was a Harvard-educated lawyer, author, and the daughter of a revolutionary general. She was fluent in English. She was, by all accounts, charming. She invited Haywood to a hotel room. She poured him whiskey. He became intoxicated. He vomited. When he tried to lie down, she poured animal poison directly into his mouth. Then she arranged pills around his body to make it look like an overdose. The motive, according to prosecutors, was a financial dispute, a failed real estate deal, a threat, allegedly, that Haywood had made against her son. The prosecution called the evidence irrefutable. The case only came to light months later, when Bo Xilai's deputy, a man named Wang Lijun, walked into the American consulate in Chengdu carrying evidence that Bo had tried to cover up his wife's crime. The story triggered a political earthquake that ultimately ended Bo Xilai's career and sent him to prison for life. Kailai was tried in a single day. She admitted to intentional homicide and said she had suffered a mental breakdown. The court gave her a suspended death sentence, which, under Chinese law, is almost always commuted to life after 2 years. She has been incarcerated since 2012. As of 2026, Kailai has spent over 13 years behind bars, with the possibility of medical parole still technically open. Power, wealth, and political protection couldn't save her. But the next woman on this list had something else entirely. She had patience. Case 7. Elena Kiejliches. March the 24th, 2000. Tot Hill, Staten Island, New York. By all appearances, Elena Kiejliches had everything. A sprawling mansion on East Loop Road in one of New York City's wealthiest neighborhoods. A husband worth an estimated $3 million. 2 young children. What she also had was a lover, a Brooklyn ex-convict named Messiah Justice. That night, while her 2 children slept upstairs, Elena shot her husband, Boris Kiejliches, 49-year-old Russian jet fuel magnate, once in the head in the basement of their home. Then she called Messiah. When he arrived, she met him at the door. According to his testimony, she had a red substance on her hands. She was wearing blue spandex pants. She led him downstairs where Boris lay on the floor wrapped in sheets and tied with cord. "Don't worry," she told him. "It's not your business, but you have to help me." Over the following weeks, Elena flew her children to Walt Disney World, a trip that had been pre-planned. While there, she reportedly called Messiah Justice nearly 100 times to ensure the body was being properly disposed of. It wasn't. Boris Kiejliches' decomposed remains were found stuffed in a cardboard barrel floating near the Belt Parkway, on the Brooklyn-Queens border, more than a month later. Police initially suspected the Russian mob. The investigation shifted when they learned about the affair. Messiah Justice, facing his own charges, accepted a plea deal and testified against Elena in full detail. Elena spent an estimated $85,000 on gifts and cash for her accomplice, including a bounced check for a $300,000 Bentley as a thank you. In June 2002, a jury convicted her of second-degree murder after 3 hours of deliberation. As of 2026, Elena Kiejliches has served over 23 years of her 22 years to life sentence at the New York State Women's Facility. The next case starts with a woman who didn't have a lover. She had a plan, written down on paper a month in advance. Case 8. Michele Lynn Kehoe. October 26, 2008. Buchanan County, Iowa. She told her husband she was taking the boys to visit her ill mother at a nursing home. She packed them into the family van, her 2 sons, 7-year-old Sean and 2-year-old Seth. She drove them into a remote area near a pond east of Littleton, Iowa. She had purchased a hunting knife a month earlier. She had also been drafting a fake note, a detailed, handwritten alibi she had prepared in advance to give investigators. At the pond, she bound her sons' eyes, mouths, and hands with duct tape. She took them outside the van, she attacked them both. Seth, the 2-year-old, died at the scene. Sean survived. He managed to free himself from the tape and lock himself inside the van overnight, his younger brother's body on the ground just outside the window. The next morning, Michele staggered to a nearby house and presented her fabricated story. A stranger had ambushed them at a gas station, forced them to the pond, and attacked her family. She had tried to fight him off with pepper spray. When deputies reached the van and found Sean inside, they asked him one question. "Who did this to you?" "My mom," he said. Michele Kehoe had a 12-year history of depression and had previously made multiple serious attempts on her own life, including, she later admitted, intentionally driving her car into the Iowa River with both boys inside 1 year earlier. 4 men had pulled them out and were celebrated as heroes. No one knew the truth until after 2008. In November 2009, after just 2 hours of jury deliberation, she was convicted on all counts. She was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, plus 25 consecutive years. As of 2026, Michele Kehoe has spent over 17 years incarcerated in the Iowa state prison system. The next case involves a gap in time that prosecutors called agonizing, and the jury agreed. Case 9, Amanda Kaur. November 28, 2010. New Underwood, South Dakota. At approximately 7 in the morning, a shot was fired inside a home on Oak Street. Staff Sergeant Ira Kaur, 26, an Air Force pay technician stationed at Ellsworth Air Force Base, was lying in bed when the bullet entered the right side of his head. It traveled through a frontal lobe and exited his left cheek. He did not die. He was in what prosecutors would later describe as agonizing pain. His wife, Amanda, did not call 911. Instead, she took her 2 children to breakfast at a local cafe. She returned home around 1 in the afternoon. At some point between noon and 1 p.m., approximately 5 to 6 hours after the first shot, she shot her husband a second time. This time, directly in the forehead at close range. Only then did she call emergency services. Amanda Kaur had purchased the .45 caliber handgun just 2 days before the attack, alone, without her husband. In the days leading up to the shooting, investigators found she had searched the internet for information about the best place to shoot someone in the head. Ira Kaur had adopted Amanda's 2 children just 2 weeks before his death. He had applied to officer candidate school. He was working toward his master's degree. Amanda told investigators the shooting happened during a struggle, that Ira had been suicidal. Her defense attorney argued she suffered from PTSD and was emotionally disengaged. Prosecutors pointed to the 5-hour gap, the internet searches, and the fact that she stopped to have breakfast with her children. In September 2011, she was sentenced to 65 years in prison. As of 2026, Amanda Kaur has spent over 15 years incarcerated. She will be eligible for parole after serving 32.5 years. The next woman also orchestrated her husband's death, but she didn't pull the trigger herself. She used a letter. Case 10, Marcia Gayle Kelly. October 23, 2005. Cushing, Texas. James Kelly was asleep in his home in Nacogdoches County when he was shot to death. He was a truck driver. He trusted the people in his house. 3 of them, including his own stepdaughter, had been recruited by his wife, Marcia. The motive prosecutors laid out was precise. A $100,000 life insurance policy on James Kelly's life, combined with an ongoing dispute in the household about how to discipline Marcia's daughter, Shayna Sepulvado. When those arguments reached a breaking point, Marcia didn't leave. She didn't file for divorce. She offered a teenager named Colton Weir a vehicle and money to kill her husband. 3 days after James Kelly was shot, Marcia agreed to answer questions at the sheriff's office. She came voluntarily. She asked politely, about 20 minutes in, if she could leave to handle her husband's funeral arrangements. Investigators told her the questions wouldn't take long. Then they read her Miranda rights. She wasn't leaving. In a signed statement, she acknowledged hearing some of the young people talk about wanting to kill James, but claimed she never offered them anything. Other men came forward to say otherwise. Colton Weir testified she had promised him payment. At trial, Shayna took the stand to defend her mother, claiming she alone had orchestrated everything. The jury didn't believe her. They convicted Marcia Kelly of capital murder in August 2006. Because the state didn't seek the death penalty, she received automatic life without parole. Shayna was later convicted separately. So was Colton Weir. Both received life sentences, though later court rulings made them eligible for resentencing due to their ages at the time. As of 2026, Marcia Gayle Kelly has spent over 20 years at the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas, and still insists she is innocent. The next woman didn't use people. She used letters. 143 of them. Case 11, Donna Marie Roberts. December 11, 2001. Howland Township, Ohio. At 12:01 in the morning on December 12th, Donna Roberts called 911. She had found her partner, Robert Fingerhut, dead on the kitchen floor. He had been beaten in the garage and shot multiple times, in the back, the chest, and the head. She sounded distraught. She had reason to rehearse. Investigators searching the home found 143 letters hidden in a dresser drawer. Love letters from a man named Nathaniel Jackson, who had just been released from prison days earlier. In a shopping bag tucked in the trunk of Donna's own car, parked in the same garage where Fingerhut had been beaten, they found 145 more letters. These were Donna's letters to Jackson. Together, they ran to nearly 300 pages, and throughout them, in language prosecutors described as thinly veiled, the two had discussed killing Fingerhut, collecting his life insurance, and starting a new life together. The murder happened less than a week after Jackson's release. Jackson gave a videotaped confession, claiming self-defense. He also claimed Donna knew nothing about his plans. The letters said otherwise. The recorded jailhouse phone calls said otherwise. Donna Roberts was 58 years old at the time of the crime. She had been with Fingerhut for nearly 20 years. He had supported her businesses, helped her start over multiple times. At her trial, she told the jury directly, "The death penalty. You have no other choice." Judge Stewart agreed. He sentenced her to death in 2003. That sentence was later vacated on procedural grounds, then reimposed in December 2008. On the morning of her resentencing, Donna attended her mother's funeral. 1 hour later, she walked into the courtroom. As of 2026, Donna Marie Roberts has spent over 24 years on Ohio's death row at the Reformatory for Women in Marysville. The next woman also let someone else carry out the violence, but she stood in the room and watched. Case 12, Linda T. Jones. November 7th, 1995. Lake Asbury, Florida. Linda and Jack Jones had been married for nearly 30 years. They had raised 2 daughters together in what neighbors described as a dream home. Then, Linda brought a 17-year-old from her office into their household, and Jack fell in love with her. When Linda discovered the affair, she demanded it end. It didn't. Jack secretly moved the teenager into an apartment. He bought her an engagement ring. Linda's response unfolded methodically over 3 months. She filed 3 false police reports, 2 fabricated burglaries, and a fake sexual assault to establish a pattern of local crime near their home. She solicited at least 2 separate men to kill Jack. She reached out to a tax client named Donald Bradley, who brought along two young brothers, Brian McWhite, 21, and Patrick McWhite, 17, promising them $100 each to beat up a guy. On the night of November 7th, Bradley called Linda to confirm Jack was home. She left the front door unlocked. She turned off the porch lights. She told him where the gun would be waiting. The three men entered. Jack fought back. Bradley struck him repeatedly with a thick wooden stick while Linda stood nearby. When Brian and Patrick told Bradley to stop, Linda said, "Hey, stop, stop," in a tone witnesses later described as flat and rehearsed. Jack Jones died from blunt trauma. He sustained over a dozen severe blows. When Officer Yeager arrived 8 minutes after Linda's 911 call, she was standing calmly on the dark front porch. No blood, no tape, no sign of being a hostage. Linda Jones was convicted of first-degree murder in November 1997. As of 2026, Linda T. Jones has spent over 28 years serving her life sentence in the Florida Department of Corrections, with no possibility of parole. The next case spans 2 states, 2 murders, and a 2-hour prison pass. Case 13, Carolyn Ann King, September 15, 1993, Palmyra, Pennsylvania. Bradley Martin had been granted a temporary 2-hour release from Lebanon County Prison, a routine pass for a minor parole violation. He walked out of the facility and met Carolyn King. He never went back. Together, they drove to the Palmyra townhouse of 74-year-old Guy Goodman, a florist who had written letters to Bradley during his incarceration. Inside the home, Goodman was struck with a vase, then suffocated with a plastic bag secured with duct tape. They stole his car, his credit card, and his checkbook, and fled across multiple states. For 10 days, Goodman's body lay undiscovered inside the quiet townhouse while his credit card was being used across the American Midwest. When police finally found him, King and Martin had already reached North Dakota. There, they abducted a 59-year-old woman named Donna Martz, a complete stranger. They drove her through multiple states before shooting her with a .357 Magnum in the remote Nevada desert and leaving her body behind. They were captured in Arizona on October 5th after a high-speed chase. At trial, prosecutors offered both defendants a plea deal, life sentences, no death penalty. Bradley Martin was ready to sign. Carolyn King held the pen. Then she put it down. Her refusal voided the deal for both of them. The judge later ruled that forcing Martin to death row because of his co-defendant's whim violated his constitutional rights. Both were sentenced to death. Both sentences were eventually converted to life without parole, after decades of appeals and a statewide moratorium on executions. As of 2026, Carolyn Ann King has spent over 32 years incarcerated within the Pennsylvania state prison system, serving consecutive life sentences for murders in 2 states. The next case involves something hidden for over a decade, inside a locked closet. Case 14, Michele G. M. Kalina, July 2010, Reading, Pennsylvania. Her husband had shared a home with his wife Michele for over 25 years. They had raised a family together. He thought he knew everything about her. Then, one afternoon in July 2010, he and his teenage daughter opened a storage closet in their home. They had been told for years never to go in there. Inside, in tubs, coolers, and cardboard boxes, were the remains of 5 infants. Michele Kalina had carried on a secret affair beginning in 1996. Over the course of years, she became pregnant multiple times and concealed each pregnancy from both her husband and her lover. One child, a daughter, she had placed for adoption at a hospital in 2003. The others were never reported. They were kept in the locked closet. One body was encased in cement inside a cooler. The others were wrapped in garbage bags. Because of the degree of decomposition, investigators could not determine the cause of death for most of them. The one murder charge filed was based on a single male infant, whose remains could be medically analyzed. Michele later told a psychiatrist the closet represented her psychological closet, the place where she had buried everything she couldn't face. Her husband, after discovering what was inside, told investigators he still loved her. He said he intended to stay married to her. Michele Kalina pleaded guilty in August 2011 to 1 count of third-degree murder, 5 counts of abuse of a corpse, and 5 counts of concealing a child's death. Judge Linda Ludgate sentenced her to the maximum, 20 to 40 years in prison. As of 2026, Michele Kalina has spent over 15 years incarcerated in Pennsylvania. She will remain in prison until at least 2031. The next case begins with a 2-year-old girl and a locked bathroom door. Case 15, Renee Marie King. November 20th, 2010. New Haven, Michigan. Jeffrey Wolfenbarger left for work that morning and trusted his wife to care for his 2-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily was a normal toddler. She had accidents. She threw tantrums. She was, by every account, just a little girl doing what little girls do. Renee King was alone with Lily for 3 hours. When paramedics arrived after Renee's 911 call, Lily was unresponsive. She was pronounced dead. Renee told police she had taken Lily into the shower, that her chronic back condition had caused her to drop the child accidentally. The autopsy told a different story. Medical examiner Dr. Daniel Spitz documented at least 20 distinct impacts to Lily's head, 5 of them independently capable of causing death. The severity of the internal injuries, he testified, was comparable to what a person sustains in a high-speed car crash. Lily had also been sexually assaulted. A microscopic artificial fiber was recovered during the examination. Renee had cleaned the scene and washed Lily's body before calling 911. During 3 days of police interviews, her account shifted more than a dozen times. Defense attorneys argued her inconsistencies were the result of panic. Prosecutors argued they were the result of calculation. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. They didn't ask to see a single exhibit. Renee Marie King was convicted on all counts: first-degree murder, first-degree child abuse, and first-degree criminal sexual conduct. On April 9, 2012, the same morning her divorce from Jeffrey was finalized in a separate courtroom, she was sentenced to life without parole, plus consecutive decades for the additional charges. As of 2026, Renee Marie King has spent over 15 years incarcerated in the Michigan Department of Corrections. She will never be released. The final 3 cases begin in a flooded basement in 1965. Case 16, Lois Jurgens, April 11, 1965. White Bear Lake, Minnesota. The St. Paul area was flooding. The Mississippi River had broken records. In the basement of a home on Gardenet Drive, water was rising, and Lois Jurgens was in a rage. By morning, her 3.5-year-old adopted son, Dennis, was dead. Dennis Jurgens had arrived in the home as an infant. From nearly the beginning, he was singled out. Within months of placement, he had been hospitalized with serious burns to his body. Over the following years, neighbors noticed him wearing sunglasses as a toddler to hide the bruising around his eyes. He gained only 3 pounds in 2.5 years. He was denied food. He was forced to kneel on a broomstick for extended periods. The medical examiner who processed Dennis's death marked it deferred, not accident, not murder. In a community where Lois's brother was a lieutenant in the local police department, the investigation quietly closed. For 21 years, no one was charged. Then, Dennis's birth mother, Jerry Sherwood, tracked down the records and demanded answers. A new investigation was opened. The original examiner's notes were reviewed. Dennis's other adopted siblings, who had since grown up, finally spoke. One of them described watching Lois beat Dennis and throw him down the stairs. Lois Jurgens was arrested on January 29, 1987, 22 years after Dennis died. At trial, the evidence was devastating. The 1965 autopsy findings, the sibling testimony, the documented history of abuse. Lois was convicted of third-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years. She served 8. She was paroled in 1995. As of 2026, Lois Jurgens is believed to still be alive in her late 90s, living in Stillwater, Minnesota, a free woman more than 60 years after Dennis died. The next, mother made a promise to her children the night before she killed them. Case 17, Leisa Jones, July 22, 2010. Port Richmond, Staten Island, New York. The night before, she had told them they were going to Coney Island. 14-year-old CJ, 10-year-old Brittany, and 7-year-old Melanie went to sleep believing tomorrow would be a good day. 2-year-old Jermaine was too young to understand. Leisa Jones was 32 years old. She had immigrated from Jamaica, raised her children largely alone, and by the summer of 2010 was drowning. She had been evicted from a previous home. She owed nearly $7,000 in back rent. She had last worked as a holiday security guard 6 months earlier. She was feeding her family through a church food pantry. Before dawn on July 22nd, she used a straight razor on 3 of her children as they slept. Then she set the apartment on fire. Firefighters pulled 4 bodies from the building. 3 of the children had no soot in their lungs. They were already gone before the fire started. 2-year-old Jermaine was pulled out alive with severe burns. He was rushed to the hospital. He died 9 days later. Initially, authorities theorized that CJ, who had a history of behavioral problems, had attacked his siblings and set the fire. That theory collapsed entirely when the medical examiner's findings made clear it was impossible. A charred note was found near Lisa's body. The only legible words were, "Am sorry." Handwriting analysis confirmed it was hers. A psychiatric expert later described what Leisa experienced as a form of severe depression, so consuming that, in her fractured state, she believed she was protecting her children from a world that had already broken her. The medical examiner ruled her death a suicide. The children's deaths were ruled homicides. There was no trial. There was no sentencing. There was only a makeshift memorial outside, balloons and stuffed animals tied together with yellow police tape. The final case on this list involves a woman who made her plans in writing, 288 letters worth. Case 18, Amanda Jane Kelly, May 12, 2012. South Fremantle, Western Australia. It was a Sunday. 4 people were in a house together, consuming cannabis and crystal meth. The house belonged to the family of a man named Sam Walker, 27. His girlfriend, Amanda Kelly, was 19. Her boyfriend, Jonathan Lee, 23, was also there. And a 4th man, David Houston, 26, had been brought along to supply the drugs. David had a pregnant girlfriend at home. At some point during the afternoon, Sam Walker announced to Amanda that he was going to kill David Houston. Amanda Kelly left the room. She went to the bathroom with Jonathan. They had sex in the shower. When they came back out, Walker had already placed a cord around David's neck. Amanda did not call police. She did not intervene. She watched. Walker called on the others to help. Jonathan Lee joined in, kicking and striking Houston while Walker continued choking him. Together, they beat, kicked, stomped, and strangled David Houston to death. Then, they wrapped his body in a plastic barbecue cover. Days later, Walker hired a rental utility truck, one fitted with a standard GPS tracking unit, and drove the body 130 kilometers south of Perth to a remote bush site near Binningup. He buried it under acid, lime, and concrete. Police pulled the GPS records from the rental company. They drove directly to the grave. David Houston's body was recovered on June 2, 2012. All three were arrested. Amanda pleaded guilty to murder. Her defense argued she was a minor player. The court disagreed. Justice Michael Corboy sentenced her to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 14 years. As of 2026, Amanda Jane Kelly has spent over 13 years incarcerated. Her earliest possible parole date is 2026, this year. 18 cases, 18 women. 18 reminders that violence doesn't always look the way we expect. It hides behind familiarity, behind love, behind closed doors and locked closets. The victims in these stories deserved better. Better protection, better systems, better outcomes. Remember their names. If this video made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Capital True Crime for more stories told without flinching. This has been Capital True Crime. We'll see you in the next one.